summing it up quickly. And this is about his trip with Save One Life. Ish. And I'm going to awkwardly move all my stuff. So, thank you. Thanks, Chris.
So, as Emily said, I just got back from 10 days in Africa yesterday afternoon. So, I tried to go over my speech last night very, very unsuccessfully. Just pretty much fell asleep. So, hopefully it'll go smoothly, but bear with me if it doesn't. So, this isn't actually about this trip this year. This is about my first trip to Africa, which happened last May. But to start out, just like to tell you guys a little bit about myself. So I was born September 6, 1985, and was diagnosed at birth with severe hemophilia B. We had a pretty normal childhood. Grew up, visited the treatment center for bleeds many times, and played baseball pretty much constantly. As my mom and Dr. Mango Johnson can attest to, that's pretty much everything I did every day. Which eventually gave me the opportunity to go to college on a baseball scholarship. So I attended Doane College, which is a picture on the bottom, and played baseball there for 4 years, and earned a degree in biology. And while in school and home for summers, I actually was offered a position part-time at the treatment center, working in the hemophilia lab, which I thought was the best job in the world. So I get done with school, come home for the summer, have a great job in the lab. I got to work with everybody in the treatment center and learn more about my own hemophilia, more than I ever knew before. So after graduating from Doane College, I started working full-time in the hemophilia lab. And that's kind of where the whole African experience started. So in the lab, I worked with Linda Jacobson. She's been in the lab for, 30-some years. And she taught me how to run some really cool tests, mainly a PT, a PTT, and factor levels. So it was actually really fun. I'd work in the lab, and if we needed an abnormal control, we just draw my blood, and there you go. And she taught me a really interesting method of doing it. Nowadays, in the lab, we get your factor level drawn at the clinic. They send the blood, to the hospital, and it just goes into large automated machines. But the method we used in the research lab was more manual, very hands-on, kind of an older technique. And that is really what helped or started this whole trip to Africa. Linda knew several hematologists around the country, and one in Indiana had been wanting to start a twinning program in Kenya. And twinning programs basically just are a partnership with a treatment center in a developing country with a treatment center in the States or a developed country. And they wanted to go to Kenya and set up a lab and clinics and everything for hemophilia care there, because there really wasn't anything. And since Linda knew this manual method of doing these factor levels, it was a perfect opportunity. You could buy a fairly inexpensive machine, take it over there, and start working. So she went in 2010, kind of scouted out the terrain, and then in 2011, when we actually started our work there, she invited me to help out. So my first thought was, I'm going to Kenya, awesome. Kilimanjaro's in Africa, let's go climb that. So as soon as I found out I was going, I started planning my trip to Kilimanjaro. So after college baseball, I pretty much just fell in love with outdoor activities. That's actually, that top picture is from camp a few years ago. Amy Board took that picture. We went and climbed a 13,000-foot peak with the kids at hemophilia camp, and then this is mountain biking in Moab. And so once I decided on the Kilimanjaro climb, I asked my Uncle Dave, who is a very experienced mountaineer, if he wanted to come along, and he, of course, said yes. So we began planning our trip, read books, planned all the logistics, and then I was given the opportunity to go to a camp meeting in Arizona, where I met someone named Lori Kelly. Lori Kelly is an amazing person, and she started a group called Save One Life. And basically, their goal was to help people in the developing world with hemophilia that don't have the care that we have here. Basically, you can sponsor a child with hemophilia in these developing countries, and hopefully that money will get them to clinics that normally would be too expensive for them to get there, and to go to school, so they're not stuck in jobs that require them to do manual labor. They can actually get an education and hopefully have a job in an office. But she, during her presentation, she gave some statistics that just blew my mind. One of these is, so in America, we have 4% of the world's hemophilia population. But guess how much factor we consume?
90.
Yeah, like percentage-wise. Anybody have a guess?
50.
It's 33%. So the 4% of us in the United States consume 33% of the factor in the world. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be using our factor to do prophylactic treatment and do things like that, just showing the discrepancy in the factor distribution. All right, and then another interesting question she posed was, of the 400,000 people worldwide with hemophilia, how many actually have access to care? Does anybody have a guess for that? Or don't have access to care?
I think that I read that 75% of the people in the world don't have access.
Yeah, and that's right. 75% of the people worldwide have no access to hemophilia care. And, statistics are awesome. They, describe things well, but then she showed us the pictures of the people that she's visited with hemophilia. And I'm sorry if some of these are a little graphic, but this is what hemophilia care looks like for those 75%. Over here on the left is, I think it was a 12-year-old in Zimbabwe who obviously has never had a dose of factor in his life. And then this is a young boy with, obviously a pretty severe head bleed. And this kind of opened my eyes to what I was getting myself into. When I was first told, hey, you're going to go to Africa and help set up a lab, I just didn't picture this. I'm not sure what I was imagining, but it wasn't this. And then she described what Save One Life does. And she gave us this awesome story of this young Romanian boy. He's up on the left, sitting down. And when he was discovered in his village in Romania, he couldn't even stand. He had so many bleeds in his legs and knees. He was immobile. And his family didn't have enough money to take the bus trip to a hospital. So he just basically sat in their home. So with the Save One Life sponsorship, he was able to begin going to clinics and things, taking the trip that his parents couldn't afford to get a little bit of care. And with Save One Life, they actually were able to buy him a stationary bike. That's what his dream was. He was like, I want a stationary bike so I can exercise. And this is a year later, he's actually was able to start walking and riding his bike, and now he can actually move around the village. So at the end of her presentation, she mentioned that Save One Life was actually going to be doing a climb of Kilimanjaro as a fundraiser, which I had no idea about. It was just a very strange coincidence. So as soon as she got done with her presentation, I walked up and I was like, hey, I'm actually going to Kenya and climbing Kilimanjaro in a couple months. And we talked several times, and she asked me if I wanted to join the fundraiser. They had 10 climbers. going in August, and since I was already planning my trip earlier, they decided I'd be the scout for the trip. So, in mid-May, I began my trip to Kenya. First, that 8-hour or 10-hour flight to London, with an 8-hour layover, and then another 8-hour flight to Kenya. And then we arrived in Eldoret, Kenya, which is where we would be doing our work. And it was just a completely different world. I don't know how many people have traveled to the developing world, but this was my first trip, and it just completely shocked me. Most of the roads were lined with the small shops and shacks that people lived in, and it's just amazing to see the amount of people in such small spaces and without like proper sanitation. We walked through the village a few times, and there's just the sewage drain right through the middle of the street. And then we walked to the wards the first day, and we met Stephen. He was in the wards, which are the most awful place I've ever been. We walk into the building, and the stench is just overwhelming. You walk in, and there's a small hallway with rooms on either side with about 6 beds, but 40 people in that room. 2 to 3 to a bed, all just suffering. And then we found this poor boy. He's 12 years old in the pediatric ward. You can definitely tell he has hemophilia. His joints are terrible, but he didn't even know he had hemophilia. And 2 weeks before we got there, he came to the hospital with abdominal pain. And none of the doctors knew that he had hemophilia. It never crossed their mind. So they immediately did an appendectomy, obviously without factor. So we don't even know if he had appendicitis. It could have just been a bleed. But they just removed his appendix, and basically that's what happened. He laid there bleeding for 2 weeks before we got there. That bandage had been changed 2 days before because they couldn't change bandages every day because they didn't have enough. And he was almost dead when we got there. So this was my wake-up call to hemophilia in these developing countries. I mean, he basically had no chance. And we'll definitely get back to Stephen, but I mean, I just wanted to show you that as kind of what my first impression of hemophilia was there. It just was absolutely shocking to me. So when I got there, we were giving a symposium on hemophilia, just basically trying to teach the caregivers there how to look for hemophilia, what to look for. Damaged joints are very common. Just anything they could use to be able to pick up somebody like Stephen before they operate on him without anything. Oh, and I forgot to mention too that they couldn't even give him a blood transfusion, Stephen, because they didn't have any blood. They were completely out of blood in the hospital. So our educational symposium started the day after we met Stephen. And there was probably about 8 of us there giving speeches about hemophilia care and laboratory testing. And I was asked to do a speech about living with hemophilia in the United States. And of course I, had all the slides about me, rock climbing and mountain biking and ice climbing. And I actually didn't even want to give it after seeing Stephen. I said, I feel so guilty. Like, I don't want to get up there and say, look at all these cool things I get to do. And here they can barely survive. So I actually met 2 young men from Nairobi that also have hemophilia. And we talked before I was due to give my presentation. And we talked a little bit, and I asked them, why don't you give a presentation too, so that these healthcare providers can see the difference between how I live and how you live. And so this is actually, it's kind of a dark picture, but this is this is my friend Paul, who has moderate hemophilia A, and then this is Isaac, who has severe hemophilia A. And they did a really great presentation after mine on living with hemophilia in Kenya.